All right, welcome to the follow up. We are following up today on a live video I did on Georgia Space Chat pretty much a year ago entitled Upright Bass in Pop and R&B. My guest today on the follow up, and I can't really believe that I'm saying this, but my guest today is the mighty Ron Carter. Mr. Carter, thank you so much for making yourself available and welcome to the follow up.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Mr. Farmer. I know your dad very well.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Yeah. That's very cool. Well, here we are. Let's get into it right away.
Okay.
Um, the live video, upright bass in pop and R&B, was my attempt to show to the audience that there has actually been quite a lot of lineage and quite a lot of players and quite a lot of music where upright bass was used in pop and R&B. One of the songs that I played during the live video was from a Tribe Called Quest, a song called Verses from the Abstract, which featured yourself on upright bass. And for the sake of keeping this video and this interview somewhat concise and to the point, I would like to focus on actually, because I know there's a lot that we could focus on um, from your recorded work, but I would like to focus on actually two songs. And one
Okay.
is the Verses from the Abstract, Tribe Called Quest, and the other one goes back a little further, which is Roberta Flack from the very first album, First Take, compared to what. So why don't I open it up to you? The question or the what I was trying to present to the audience was that the upright bass has a certain sound, a certain timbre. I liken it to a certain punch that works very well in that environment, in that genre. Was that something that you were actively pursuing in terms of the sound when recording those two songs? If you want to, we can start with perhaps Roberta Flack first to go in a chronological order.
Sure. Yeah. Well, can I call you George?
Oh, yeah, of course, please.
You're real George.
Yeah, I'm George. Yeah.
You know the expression real George?
What's that?
It means everything is okay. If it's real George, that means it's okay.
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
Uh, that Roberta Flack record, it happened because um, the band she had brought to New York to record her library
Right.
and had worked there at this small club in Washington called Mr. Charlie's, something like that.
Okay.
And they got to New York, and after 2 days, they never got enough stuff done, so that the producer of the record company and the A&R man felt that they couldn't keep this going, so they had to get guys in here who were used to making records.
Mm. Of
So they
course.
called me and Grady Tate and Bucky Pizzarelli and
Of
ultimately
course.
Bill Fisher to add maybe some strings and stuff. So we walked in there cold, playing her book.
Wow.
Uh, we knew what she expected because she had worked with these guys for a very long time.
Right.
So my job was to, as best I could, given whoever she was at the time, Roberta Flack, I knew Grady, I had
Right.
to kind of bring the reason they brought me to this day, what I do, which is kind of my personal sound.
Right.
And what I like to think is that when I take the bass out of the case, that sound comes out with it, you
Of
know.
course.
And
Yeah.
my job is to make that sound part of the sound of the record, to start that part of their music concept, whatever it is. My sound, which doesn't change, is supposed to match that need,
Of course. Of course.
you know. And the difficult part is how long do I make that sound?
Right. Right.
If it's too long, the beat feels drags out. If it's too short, the beat seems to speed up.
No, that's a great point. That is a great point. That was I was trying to get to that in terms of, the punch and the
Yeah.
sustain, the decay of the sound. How far do you actively influence the
But
groove or the pocket or whatever, right?
I'm really aware of that the space.
Right.
I tell my students, George, that the beat covers this much space,
Right.
and once the beat that's too long exceeds this space over here, the
Right.
time slows down because there's too much beat sound for this limited space.
Mm. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
the sound is shorter. There's not enough sound of the beat left to fill up this arbitrary space that we call the beat.
Right.
My job, what I've tried to do as we speak, to make my beat fill this space. Whatever else is in there, I don't really care. My
Right.
sound is supposed to be this beat, whatever length we decide to make it.
Right,
And
right,
I've learned through all these years of trial and error with a modicum of success is how to control the length of my note.
right, right.
And that determines where the groove is.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Determines
yeah, most
determines
definitely.
how deep the groove is.
Yeah,
Groove is.
yeah,
You know, it determines how long the beat is on the ballad.
yeah.
You know,
Of
like when you
course.
play with Shirley Horn, her beat's this long, man.
Yeah,
So I need to make my sound last this long to match where she thinks the beat is going to fall for a beat
yeah.
two.
Of course, of course. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Not to sidestep completely, but I did a show with Audra McDonald called Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill. She was playing Billie Holiday. Part of my preparation for that show was listening to you. I mean, it was of course listening to Billie Holiday a lot, but listening to you play behind Little Jimmy Scott. Jimmy Scott.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a great album. I think it was called All the Way from perhaps 91, 92, somewhere around there. Again, with Grady Tate, Kenny Barron, Fathead Newman, and yourself on bass. Um, talking, listening exactly to what you just described in terms of ballad playing and in terms of elongation of the note to fit where the singer is going to put it, basically.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Roberta's a really great piano player, man. She
Yeah,
knows exactly her chord voicings that she needs to make what she wants to sing on top of that work.
yeah, yeah.
And my job is to understand that she really means this voicing.
Right, right, right.
While
I
I
was
might not play a specific note for that sound,
right,
my job is to find my kind of note that enhances that sound she plays like this.
right, right.
So that was the trip for me. And she knew what to expect because she had this guy as her band. They've been playing this library, man, for over 2 years.
Yeah,
And we come off the street, figuratively
yeah,
speaking,
yeah, yeah. Of course, of course, of
and we
course.
got to match what she's been hearing for all these nights, in a nightclub,
Crazy,
you know.
crazy.
And so I was really conscious of how long my beat was,
Mm-hmm.
and what kind of accents I played, like compared to what. I made certain notes a little longer or shorter because the groove kind of demanded
Yeah,
that kind of note length control.
right,
And one of my concerns is when I get these kinds of sessions, is that the producers are also aware of great electric bass players.
right,
And I know somewhere back here they say that maybe we'll try the electric bass because of the sound that they present.
right,
Okay, I'm okay with that. Look, that's their choice.
right,
But if they watch how I control the length of the beat
right,
and how much more difficult it is for electric bass player to control the length of the beat just because of the physicality of their instrument
right,
in itself.
right, right,
It doesn't have that sound. It's a solid body.
right, right. It doesn't have the punch that an acoustic instrument has.
And
That's
I'm relying on the bass's body, sound chamber, this 6 feet by 3 feet by 8 inch
of course,
box
of course, of course.
to allow me to control that length of the note
Right, right.
and to control how much punch I allow the note to have.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and it sounds like a science, and it's probably it's more oral than mental. Once you hear what it is,
It's funny. I had a very similar conversation with Will Lee many years ago, hanging out at a club, and he playing a gig, me playing a gig, and for whatever reason he likened it to, with the bass, it's the one thing that it's the smallest thing with the bass has the biggest impact. Right, the smallest change of the instrument, the smallest change in your attitude in what you're playing has the biggest impact, right?
yeah,
It's one of those things, I think, and with the upright bass, it's perhaps amplified, even more so because you're dealing with an acoustic phenomenon. Maybe who would, I mean, I wouldn't know, but that's my idea behind that. Very quickly, perhaps let me move ahead to verses from the abstract, right? Because now we're talking about the length of the note and the influence that has over the groove, over the pocket, whether it's a little pushed a little behind, or right in the middle. Now, the interesting thing about verses from the abstract, at least for me, from a bass player's point of view, aside from me just digging the track, is that you're able with the upright bass that doesn't necessarily have as much sustain as the electric bass guitar, um, but you're able to fill a lot of space, right? And maybe not necessarily sustain the note, but it feels, and again, perhaps my language is not sufficient, but it feels as if the vibration lingers in the air, right? And I was wondering how do you approach that? Like how do you get to that point? If there is an answer to that, I don't. Of course, I wouldn't know that.
Well, there's a lot of possibilities here. One thing that's important in this particular incident, uh, George, is that that record was recorded in the control room and not in the control and not in a separate booth.
I'll check that out. Okay.
Okay, now, just take a moment now. I get this sounds more complicated than it is, but once you see where I'm going, you understand the answer to your question.
I'll try.
Okay, a sound booth for the bass is roughly 8 feet by 10 feet by 8 feet. You read
Okay.
that? Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Studio space is roughly 6 feet by 4 feet by 10 feet. It's a much smaller area.
Of
Agree with
course.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now that means, George, that the bass sound is not traveling so far because the
Right.
space is more limited.
Right. It's yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that means that the bass sound is going to be pure
Mm.
and it's going to last longer because the sound's not going to die as quickly
Right.
because the room is smaller.
Of course.
And because we're in this small control room, now it's literally 1 foot from the board with the amp with the pickup,
Right. Right.
we're getting the sound almost as pure as it's going to get, and it's as strong as it's going to get right away because the microphone is on my bridge.
Mm.
It's going into the cable from my bridge to the control board is like 5 feet long.
Right.
So there's no risk. The sound's not going to decay in 5 feet because it's going right to the control board.
Mm.
And the acoustic sound of the bass, which helps make that work, is half the size of the room that's outside with this booth.
Right. Right.
So the sound is much more concentrated,
Right.
and it's
Of
lasting
course.
much longer because the environment that it's in forces the sound to last longer because there's no decay area around the sound.
Right. 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 Well, that's. I mean,
One of
that's
the
an.
reasons that sounds so long is one because of that reason, for example.
Right. Right.
And the
Right.
other thing is, I would pick certain notes, George. For
Mm.
example, if I play G on the E string
Right.
and play open G and let open G ring,
Right.
I'm using the overtone series an octave lower,
Right.
an octave higher on the open G.
Right.
So it sounds twice as long, and I'm using half the effort.
Of course. Of course.
So
Of
that's
course.
one of the things I've learned how to do over the years of trial and error and figuring out what the hell's going on with this bass. How come it sounds good today and it sounded terrible yesterday?
Yes. How did that happen? Right.
Yeah. So I figured that's one way to make the sound last longer and control that by not playing harder, but limiting the open strings from making
Right.
the note on the G string vibrate longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing, just to go one step further,
Mm.
is that in the old days when they had the bass player recorded in the studio room
Right.
without the back, the screens in front of them, when I went in to start doing bass, I explained to the engineer that the bass sound is trying to fill this entire space
Right.
because it's all air.
Right.
And the
Right.
bass sound is going, it's just going, man.
Yeah.
If you get me in a room that's 1/4 this size, I'll show you how loud the bass sounds and how pure the sound is. So the guy says, "Okay, man, yeah, yeah, kid, what do you know? I'm in the air, new guy in town. What do you know? Okay, I'm just thinking, let's just give a young kid a break here. Just try to figure it out." So, no, we go into the corner and put a little screen around the bass to limit the area, of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
They play a couple of scales, and the guy says, "Okay, who's the wise guy here?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure what you mean." He said, "Well, the bass sounds bigger." I said, "Well, I told you why, man."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for this Tribe Called Quest thing because I was in such a smaller space.
Right.
The sound was easily to manipulate because it was so strong for a much longer period of physical time.
Mm. That's incredible. That is incredible. I mean, you touch on a lot of subjects what that is concerned, and one of the continuing threads throughout all of my live videos, right, and all of these endeavors is sort of to show that with this particular music, it doesn't just come out of thin air. Like it is part of a process or processes of a number of choices and trial and error and you know serious research.
Yes.
Um, what you just said totally speaks to that point, you know, in a large in this particular sense, but then also in a larger sense. Lastly, and again, I do want to thank you very much for
Come
your
on, George.
time.
I'm having a good time here. Come on.
Oh, excellent. One thing, well, one other thing is that uh, you know, strings, string height, and all of that stuff. Is that a consideration when it comes to like? Is there a consideration when it comes to pop, to R&B genre type recordings? Is there anything that you can share what that is concerned?
Okay, well, I think there are two things on the table here again, George. You asked me about 8 questions. I'm trying to get down to the two.
That's what
No,
I
no,
do.
no, 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 no. It just makes it easy for me to get to the point.
Excellent.
Uh, uh, my general measurement, George, for how high I want my strings, given the weather changes and everything,
Yeah.
I take a number two pencil and put it between the string and the fingerboard.
Right.
That's generally my height.
Right. Right.
And the reason that I've picked that height after all these years, George,
Mm.
I want to be able to make the bass body vibrate.
Right.
And unless you put energy into this box,
Right.
you get nothing.
It's not going to vibrate. Yeah.
So when you have the strings as close as some guys have them today
Mm.
to play fast and up high,
Right.
you get no force that's making the bass body do like this.
Right. Right.
I found that my current height of a number two pencil between the fingers, yeah, that's enough height of the string that allows me to really dig into the string, and I kind of hate that word. It allows me to pull the string with enough effort that it makes the whole body act like it's supposed to and
Yeah.
make it sound bigger.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of the things that frustrates me, George, is the guys who haven't gotten around to experimenting really about how the bass works.
Mm.
They put the strings down that is almost on the fingerboard, and they wonder why they're not getting much of a
Sound.
spread of the sound. Well, I
Yeah.
said, guys, because you're not putting nothing in, you're not getting anything out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and when you talk about the pop players, I think when the strings, I've had my strings this height,
Right.
it allows me to control the amount of energy going into the bass, so I can control the snap of the string,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
or uh, the projection if I'm kind of popping the strings like that. You know, it's not what I do,
Right.
but because my string starts somewhere
Right. Right. Right.
and I
Right. Right.
control how it ends, that makes that pop sound okay for the record. That kind of concept.
Of course. Of course. Of course. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Myself, I like having a fair amount of resistance on the strings.
Yeah, you gotta have that,
You
man.
know, it's. I use hybrid sets of E and A steel and D and G olive, which are gut with steel on top, um, which just happens to work really well with my upright, and I love that sound. So I do get into situations. I do a lot of work in the theater world where my subs are not cannot be convinced to play my bass because it's too high and too difficult. I'm dealing with that as much as I can.
Yeah,
Nevertheless, let me just ask you this as well. When recording both Roberta Flack and Tribe Called Quest, now with Tribe Called Quest, I do know that you were using a pickup, right?
yeah,
Roberta Flack, were you already using a pickup or?
yeah. What year was that? Do you remember offhand?
Ooh, I gotta look it up. So just bear with me.
Take a
I
moment. Yeah.
I was listening to it this morning,
My
and
guess is there's no pickup, but just a guess. I can't
yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Where is it? First take. There we go. Of course, this is the reissue from 2002, 2001. So that doesn't that doesn't really help us a lot. But here, bear with me. I can cut this out if needed. Um,
My guess is I was not using it at the time.
okay. I mean, it does
But
sound.
but
It
again,
sounds like um, there is a fair amount of room sound. Let me put
Yeah.
it this way, right?
Yeah, but again, if you could be there those dates, there was I had a small screen around me,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah.
uh, and that allowed them to do two other things, George. It allowed them to boost my track without
Hmm.
too much other stuff feeding to my microphone.
Right. Right.
The microphone is like 8 inches from the bass.
Right. Right. 69, by the way,
Okay,
1969.
okay. I was just getting into pickups.
Yeah.
Barker Sperry, who were the first really people who make really quality pickups, and they got bought by another company, and the company thought it wasn't worthwhile, and what a mistake that was.
Mm, 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 mm.
In any event, I still had my little booth around me, so
Right.
the sound was forced to go back into the microphone,
Of course.
and with a minimum amount of decay, so it sounded really present because there was nothing going on in this microphone but my bass.
Yeah. Yeah, of
You
course.
know?
No, of course. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And then Tribe Called Quest was predominantly pickup.
Yeah, because
I
it's
would, I would,
different kind of needs. They had made better pickups. I had learned how to play them. You know, you just
right,
can't put one on and get a home run. You know, I learned
right,
how to
right, right.
adjust to them, and I learned, and the pickups got better. They're still improving. They're getting better and better. You know,
That's correct.
and,
Yeah,
they do what they do. But I think the need to have one that really works for you, plural, is critical to be able to have the bass be effective in any kind of music, whether it's pop or rock or whatever the job is.
right.
We need that kind of help, and without that, we're lost in the maze of other sounds, and we have no chance to be effective in the band.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I get a lot of that. Again, like in musical theater world, I believe that with the Lady Day show, the sound guy tried to put a microphone in my bridge, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Oh no.
That's my bass is 120, 130 years old. There's no point in playing with fire what that is concerned. And I told him straight up and down, listen, I got a good pickup. Why don't you try this, right? Um, and sure enough, that worked out. On some parts of the show, we were playing completely acoustic. It was just piano, bass, and drums. And whenever she was just singing with piano and bass, they would actually turn all amplification off, right? It was a small theater as well, like 780 people. You had to project really well in order to get the sound out there. We did a good job. We did a very good job, in my opinion. Nevertheless, um, using a pickup is a necessity.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah, 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 and I totally get that. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I did not expect to get that concise information. That's exactly what I was hoping for. There was perhaps as a last thought. I tried to in the live video. I tried to show a lineage of pop music and R&B utilizing upright bass. Right now, keeping completely in mind that the term pop music and R&B was not always in place. Right, but I was wondering if you could share your opinion or your viewpoint in terms of what these labels do these labels mean something ultimately? What do they mean? Is that something that we should be aware of?
Well, I think we've kind of grown up in a society where everything's got a label.
Right,
And I think without a specific label, that article doesn't get bought, doesn't
right,
get used.
right, right.
I can't imagine, George, Coca-Cola was not called Coca-Cola. Where would they be today with that not that name,
Of
brand,
course, of course.
identity, you know?
Right, right.
Uh, while we may not agree that Coca-Cola is the best drink, we have to admit that it's the best known drink.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
If I accept that kind of logic, uh, we may not agree that that's the best pop, but we know what to call it, pop.
Right, 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 right,
We may not know what they call it, but we call R&B. It may not be our favorite music, but we know what to call it.
right,
You know?
right. Yeah,
And jazz people don't know what to call it, but they like it.
right. This is,
which is backwards, you know.
yeah.
I think labels are kind of what we the public have grown up on, man. I mean,
Right.
without a label, we don't know what to do with it, so it gets lost in the shuffle of no-name brands, so to speak.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I'm a little less concerned in when I'm involved with genres outside of the jazz community. I'm a little less concerned than what they call it, as I am that I do the job they're required to maintain that music's identity.
Right.
And that
Right.
means if I can't do the same thing with on the Stanley Turn team, for example, that I
Mm.
would do with Erica Badu.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I worked with her. I made a record with her, and I was just as cautious and careful because I knew the music didn't need what Stanley needed.
Mm. Mm.
You know,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
I try not to get too wound up about the title of the music that I'm playing. I'm more concerned with that I do with that job of that music that's not my vocabulary is supposed to be, that I make it work.
Right.
And I'm always surprised, George, when I get these one or two calls of from people who I don't know,
Right.
whose music I only know in passing. You
Right.
know,
Right.
not that I'm not a fan of them, but I'm not a fan of that genre.
Right.
You know, somehow they've done the research. They, whoever the producers are, decided that my sound or my intent or my integrity is what this particular project needs.
Yeah.
You know, now I almost didn't get the Q-Tip project because I didn't know who they were, man. I just knew that they were a bunch of hip hop guys, and that was
Right.
okay. You know, and I had to call my son. I said, hey man, I got to call this guy named Mr. Q-Tip, and he really cracked up at me right away. I'm right around Dad's old time now, right? Mr. Q-Tip, really, pops. You know. And I said, well, I don't know. What do they do? He said, well, right now they're the most musical guys of all those guys who are doing that.
Right. Right.
He calls you back, and if he answers the phone, you call him back, take the job.
Right.
Well, I did.
Right. Right. Of course. I mean, what else? Right. Right.
he,
Right. Right.
he got my son who knows music all his life. He knows what he thinks is good and bad. I wouldn't agree with his taste. He said, this band is worth your while to find out how you can help them make some music, Dad. So I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Uh, and again, what that how it's finally called is still a news. I'm not sure what that title means,
Mm.
but I know what they do.
Right.
I thought that if I can help these guys get to another level of musicality by playing a different kind of bass line for them
Mm.
and control the note length more consistently
Right.
than they can get when they mix and match and when they
Sampling.
sample.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you call a real guy, man, you get a lot more choices.
Of course.
And
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot less work for you guys, you know.
Yeah. It's a great selling point.
Yeah. So, that project it got started because my son knew who they were.
Right.
He told me he told me I should come and get with these guys, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right.
So again, whatever the title that goes along that's attached to any music, that's necessary so people will know who they are. You know, I get a little upset when I hear the jazz stations when they don't name the musicians who are on this particular track.
Mm. Right.
That's their identity, man. How can
Yeah.
they keep making a living
Right.
and making music and no one thinks that this guy who's making a solo record, quote on solo, but
Mm.
there are five guys playing. There's a piano, there's the drums, there's a whole bunch of guys who are helping this record do what it's supposed to do,
Right.
but they're not labeled. Well, here we go again. My label is Ron Carter. Your label
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
George Farmer. Well, without those labels, we just another sound in the background. So we may not get hired again because we
Right.
have no
Right.
labels. But I say, hey man, who's on that record? Some guy there, but they didn't say his name. Well, look, give me my label. You know.
Right. 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 No, I get that. I totally understand that. It was something that where I couldn't necessarily come to a definitive answer or anything like that. I entitled the video "Upright Bass in Pop and R&B" for a lack of a better
Sure,
description.
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, but there is. I mean, the other thing is that once I started doing a little bit of research, and I tried to convey that to the audience as well. My list, I always put out these playlists with the videos. My list is by no means uh, complete, right? There is plenty more. I mean, in reality, your work with Shobim, right,
Hmm.
could very well go into that category as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because there's vocals, there is a different song form, there's a
Yeah.
different instrumentation, there's all of these parameters
Concept.
all of these concepts are in place.
Yeah.
So excuse me, all of that could be added to that list as well.
Sure.
Now I went all the way back to Cap Calloway with Milt Hinton on bass and all of
Yeah.
that, um, which I thought was just a great beginning because I also wanted to show that this music was very, very popular at
Mm-hmm.
times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are. Once again, Ron Carter, I cannot thank you enough for
Oh yes, you
making the
can.
time to. Okay, well, good. Thank you. We're done. But as I said, I'm very grateful for you being available
Thank you.
today.
Thank you.
Um, please take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Stay sane out there and stay safe out there.
Thank you.
And hopefully, in the not too distant future, I believe that we got some somewhat good news today about the reopening of New York. Um,
Oh, wow.
hopefully, I'll get to see you in person in the
Okay.
not too distant future.
Well, I'm around. If you need some another advice on the other side of the screen, and I'm not doing any work, just give me a call, and we'll see if I can find something to say.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that. Absolutely. I would love to do that. Thank you so much, Ron Carter.
Thank you.
All
Have a
right.
good evening.